Do you ever look through printables or Maker World and such and wonder, man, I wish I could create my own models, but it looks so hard? Well, fear not, because today we're going to give you a run through of a very basic workflow on how to create your own design. This is intended for absolute beginners, so if you know a bit of modeling already, then this video is probably not for you. And because we're aiming for beginners, all of the software that you will see here is free and downloadable and open source. So if you want to learn how to turn this into this, stay tuned. What you're about to see is my workflow. There's lots of ways to do this, and some ways might suit you better depending on what you're actually designing, but everything we're going to do today is going to be really basic. You don't need to have any experience with modeling software at all to do this. We're starting with Blender. Blender is free and open source and is a very versatile program. There are other programs out there for sure, but most are not free, or if they give you a free version, it's not the whole thing. There are limited features with these. With Blender, you have everything for free. So let's start off with a cube, and pretty much everything you're going to make today will start off as a cube, even if you need to make something spherical. You're using a cube. Our cube is made of points called vertices and lines connecting these, and when 3 or more vertices are joined, you have a polygon, the building block of all 3D models. The vast majority of modeling is simply manipulating these, so let's do that. Right now we only have 6 faces, but if we subdivide this, we'll have more. More polygons equal more ways to manipulate an object, but the more polygons we have, the more overwhelming this process is. We can't really move each face or vertex for a model that might have hundreds of thousands of these. I mean, we can, but don't do that. The most efficient way to make a high-resolution model while only working with a handful of vertices is with modifiers. The first one we'll use is a mirror modifier. So what we're going to do is select the left faces of this cube and just delete them. Then go over to the modifiers and select mirror and the axis along which those faces were deleted. Now we just have the vertices and the faces on one side to play with, and the others will be generated automatically for us in a symmetrical fashion, so we don't need to worry about them. So what I do with one side, it does with the other. The next one is called Subdivision Surface. This will subdivide the cube like we did before, but with a much higher factor, and it uses an algorithm to do this called Catmull-Clark. So we only have a handful of polygons to play with, but Blender will create a much higher density mesh with these polygons. We're setting this to a factor of 2 for the minute, but at the end you can raise it to whatever you want to get the perfect resolution for your needs. Okay, let's start manipulating things. I am going to design a chibi-like robot. Very simple, very quick to do, very basic. He'll have a cubish head, so not much needs to be done here, except for an introduction on scaling and your best friend, hotkeys. Just like a slicer, we can stretch out the model on each axis. To do this, select the model and press S and move the mouse to adjust. To do it along a single axis, click the model, press S, and the axis to stretch along. So S and X for stretching on the X-axis, and Y and Z for the others. Now we can give it a bit more shape. Click on the face selection in the top left, and left-click a face to select it. You can then click and hold the axis selection tool. For the Z, it is the blue arrow. Click and drag to however you want it. You can also select multiple faces here, as I'm doing. So click one face to select and control and click the next, and it will select both. Then I can scale both along the Z axis by pressing S and Z and adjusting with the mouse, and we have a slightly rounded box shape. So I want this robot's head to have sort of like a frame, like a screen. So I'm going to duplicate this current shape by pressing Ctrl and D. It generates it, and I can move it out of the way by clicking and dragging on the red arrow, which is the X-axis selection tool. To have more control and add greater detail, I can add a loop cut by pressing Ctrl and R. This will segment a loop of faces, basically dividing them with lines to give more faces, which I can then manipulate and adjust. I'm selecting them like I did before with a Control-Click option, and I'm going to extrude them out by pressing E and Y. This way I am extruding the selecting faces on the Y-axis only. I can also adjust the vertices themselves by control-clicking to select whichever I want and moving them with the axis selection tool. Here I am just making sure the mirrored area lines up with the part I am adjusting, so there are no sharp angles and everything is smooth. If you make a mistake like I have done here and the edge of your mesh wanders over to the mirrored area, you can put it back by selecting the vertex and in the top right, click on the little tiny arrow which opens the transform toolbar. The edges of your mesh shouldn't wander over to the mirrored area. All of them should be at 0 on the x-axis. If it happens, it won't look good and you might also overlap surfaces, which is bad in modeling. Don't do that. Okay, let's leave that for the minute. We'll come back to it later. We're going to make some facial features now. So do exactly what we did before with the cube, but this time no mirroring. We're going to turn this cube into the robot's eye. Scale it on the Y to make it flatter and adjust the edges to make it rounder to make a eye-like shape. Let's make it a bit angry. He's going to be an angry robot. Okay, perfect. Let's make the other eye by duplicating it and mirroring it by hitting Ctrl and M and then X. So we're mirroring it on the X axis only. You can then click the duplicate and move it along the X by clicking and dragging the red arrow. To make it perfectly symmetrical with the other eye, press Tab to go to the object mode, and in the transform toolbar in the top right, you can see where it is located on the X axis. Select the value and press Ctrl C to copy, and then select the duplicate and press Ctrl V to paste it in. Hit enter and it's perfect. To keep symmetry on the mirrored side, simply negate the number that you have on the right side. Now let's make the mouth. So make the cube just like we did before, no mirroring, and flatten it as before and stretch it out on the x-axis so it's just a line. Press Tab to go to edit mode and we can manipulate the vertices to give him a bit of a grimace. Okay, new feature time. On the top of the screen there is something called proportional editing. With proportional editing activated, grabbing the vertices will show a grey circle. This is the area of effect. Whatever you move will move everything in that circle along a proportional gradient, making organic curves a lot easier. Change as you wish and then you may want to rotate things a bit. Do this by pressing Tab to go to object mode and selecting the object you wish to rotate, then hit R and whichever axis you want to rotate on. So I'm pressing R and Y to rotate it on the Y axis only. Looks nice. Okay, new cube. We're making ear type things this time. Do the same thing with the cube and flatten the cube along the X axis. Select the center faces on each side and press S to scale. This time, however, we don't want to scale along the X axis, just the Y and the Z. To do this, press S to scale and then Shift and the axis you want to exclude, and now it is scaling on all axes but the axis you don't want. Now you can adjust to make the ear a bit rounder. I'm duplicating the object again and moving it a bit outward to complete the ear. Looks good. Now I just need them on the other side, so duplicate them like we did before and symmetrize them like we did with the eyes. Okay, new cube time. We're making the body now. I do the same thing with the cube, but we're mirroring now. I do exactly what we did before. Simply select the faces to make a body shape. We're going to keep this pretty basic. He's a robot. He doesn't need abs. To do the arms, we can select a couple of side faces and extrude them by pressing E and moving out with the mouse button. We can also make him a little animated like this. Okay, select the bottom faces on the little stumps we just created and extrude out again with E. I am only extruding a bit and then repeating instead of extruding all the way, so I have more faces to control, but you can just do another loop cut like we did before if you want. Now just adjust the arms as you wish by moving faces and vertices the way you want it to look like. That's fine for the minute. Let's create a new cube and make some legs and feet. We're just doing the same thing again, no mirror necessary for this. Adjust the faces as you wish like we did before. To add some robotic-like joints, select a loop around the leg and hit E to extrude, but then press S to scale them. You can move the mouse up and down to make this little depression. Great. Now add a loop cut along the bottom faces and these are going to be his feet. Scale and adjust as desired and then symmetrize them using the transform toolbar to position the legs. You can also rotate them a bit. Okay, now we have a basic little robot dude. Cute. Let's go back to the head duplicate we made and go to edit mode. I want to take the little frame we made and copy it over. So on our modifiers on the right side, we can apply the mirror and subdivision surface modifier by clicking on the apply buttons. You can use the numpad on your keyboard to get various views. Press 1, 3, and 7 to see different side and top orthographic views and see which parts we need. To select a range of polygons in edit mode, click and drag to make a selection box. We just want the frame part. When you have selected what you need, press P and click Selection, as this separates your mesh selection from the object, creating a new object. By the way, you don't really need to do this. You've surely noticed that I like making new cubes for each new part of the model. This is because Blender, unlike Fusion, doesn't have a really good undo feature. You can press Ctrl and Z to undo the last change you made, but if you only notice a problem like 10 minutes later, then you can't really Ctrl Z all the way back. That's why I like making cubes for each new part of the model, because if you do make a mistake, then you just need to start that part again, rather than starting the whole thing from scratch. Okay, back to the model. We just want the frame, so select the parts that you don't want with the selection box, and also if you want to select the specific loop of faces, you can select one face and then control-click on a face further away. This will select all of the faces between the first one that you clicked on and the control-clicked one. You can also hold Shift-click to keep the selection you already have, but add more. When you have all that you wanted selected, just press Delete to get rid of them. We now have a frame and we can drag it over to the original shape and scale it as you wish. You might notice that this has a big hole on one side where we separated it. We need to close this. It's an incomplete mesh and any gaps in meshes are not printable. To close meshes with more than one loop, simply select an edge on one loop and another on the other loop. Press F to fill and it will create a face joining them. This has made both loops into a single continuous loop. You can now alt-click one of the edges, which selects the loop, and press F to fill, and hey, it is filled. I'm making this a bit bigger by dragging it over the y-axis, and I just noticed that I have one polygon missing here, which must have happened when I was separating it. This isn't really a problem, just select the edges and press F to fill it. Okay, let's get back to the feet. So I'm going to make them more foot-like, simply by doing what we did before, and dragging out the faces and vertices. We can give the legs a more knee-like shape, but let's not worry too much about detail. This is a very basic introductory model. We can just duplicate this one and then replace the older version with it. Going back to the head in object mode, I am selecting everything we have done before and rotating it. He's angry. Let's make him glare. Okay, new cube like we did before. We're making very basic fingers. Fingers and hands are the hardest thing to model. I guess it's like drawing. Everyone has difficulty with these. Maybe the brain is not wired to reproduce these. Just scale, adjust, and extrude like we did before. We're giving him basic blocky robotic fingers. You can copy and paste them and then adjust and rotate each to fit the hand we created. We can also adjust the hand and arm and round the shoulders a bit and give a rudimentary elbow too. Let's go back to his body again. We're going to give him a waistline just like we did with his knee joint. It's the exact same process. Create a loop cut, select that loop, press E to extrude and S to scale inwards. Adjust the mirror edge vertices and remove the overlapping faces. We can make those angles a bit tighter too. We can also adjust his lower part to make them more like shorts by loop cutting and selecting and extruding the faces. Adjust the vertices as you see fit. Let's also give him hand joints for his wrists. It's the exact same process as the waist and the knees. I think he needs some more accessories. There is one useful thing in Blender and other modeling programs, which is to import an image as a 3D model. And when I say an image, I am speaking specifically about SVGs, vector images. So I want a little design on my robot guy. I'm thinking a lightning bolt would be quite sporting. Go to Google image search and find something basic. We just need a very simple image for this, one color, no gradients. Download that and open it in a program that supports vector formats. You can use Illustrator if you have it, but you can also use Inkscape, which is free and open source. In Inkscape, simply export it as an SVG, and in Blender, go to File, Import, and SVG. It will open and it will be tiny. On the right side, you can see all your objects, so scroll down to the bottom and select it. It will be in a subfolder of the SVG, and you'll notice it has a different icon. This is because it is a curve, not a mesh. To convert it to a mesh, just right-click on it while in object mode and click Convert to, and then Mesh, and boom, it's a mesh, and you can modify it like all of the other objects you created. You might notice it looks a bit gross while in edit mode. That's okay, it happens with SVGs. We can right-click and click on Limited Dissolve, which will delete any lines that are unnecessary for its basic geometry. Let's put it on his head and using the transform toolbar, align it to the same rotation as his head. I'm just going to fix this guy's booty a bit. Okay, maybe not. Let's put that lightning bolt on his shirt too, and you may notice that it is very angular. It's not going to look very nice on his nicely toned physique. Don't worry, Blender has a modifier called Shrink-Wrap to deform and align a straight object along a curved object. This is easiest to do for a simple object, but depending on the shape, you might need to play around with the settings. And also the object should be both clean and with a high enough polygon count to actually bend it around the curve. So I have just used a single face of the bolt, subdivided it by right-clicking in edit mode and clicking subdivide, and then hitting Ctrl and T to turn the single face into multiple triangles, which is enough for the general shape. You can then use the shrink wrap modifier, and I have selected target normal project for the wrap method. The snap mode is on surface and an offset is 0.1 meters, which just means it will be 0.1 meters over the object that you're wrapping it to. Now apply that modifier and go to edit mode and extrude it so it is a solid mesh. Lovely. Okay, we're pretty much done modeling. There are a few things left to do, but let's see what the model looks like after applying the subdivision surface modifier at a higher factor. Let's increase each object to a level viewport of 4. We can remove the grid and the axis selection in overlays in the top right and view with shading. And he's looking pretty nice and disgruntled. There is really only one thing left to do, but it is very important, and that is prepping these parts for printing. As Blender is not specifically designed for 3D printing, we need to rely on an add-on for doing this quickly. We go to Edit and Preferences, then Add-ons. Go to the search and type in 3D Print Toolbox. Enable it and you will now have this toolbar on the right side of the screen. This automatically finds problems with your parts. Click on an object and press Tab to go to Edit mode and then to the 3D Print toolbar and click Check All. If everything was done correctly, pretty much nothing will show up. That's good. But something might, and if you see something on non-manifold edges, then that's a problem. Click on it and it will highlight the areas of concern. Non-manifold refers to parts that are not continuous or enclosed. This is normally specific to parts with holes or gaps or where a face may overlap another. Overlapping faces can be tricky to fix. It is obviously better to make sure they don't happen in the first place by ensuring you don't overlap the mirrored mesh. Gaps are normally easy to fix like we did with the robot's face frame earlier. Check all your objects to see if they are manifold. I have an overlap here, and while the Make Manifold button can help, it's not always perfect. In some cases you might need to delete the offending parts and fill them in like we did before. Now while you could just export this thing as an STL right now, it is a nasty model to print in one piece. This is another reason why I separate everything. We can print each individual object separately, and when printing things it is best to have one side that is completely flat so it has a nice base for the first layer and we can reduce the need for supports. We also need to make sure that each part can fit into each other part. We're going to be snap fitting these together or gluing. Most slicers have peg creation features if you want it to be easy to assemble without glue, so let's just focus on flat parts, and this is easier to do at the end because it is not always easy to mesh something with one completely flat base when using the subdivision algorithm. To do this, I use a Boolean modifier. Here I am carving a gap for the frame to fit the head by selecting the part to be carved, the head in this case, and adding the modifier on the right side. Click the picker under Object and click the object you wish to carve with, the frame, and go to Apply, and now you have a carving that allows a perfect fit for gluing. It is always a good idea to use the 3D Print Toolbox after a Boolean modifier too. Now we can do the same thing for all of the other parts. Using the exact solver works pretty well, but if it doesn't, choose fast, and if that doesn't work, then something is wrong with one of the meshes. Check the 3D Print Toolbox again. Also, always make sure that the part that is actually going to slot into another will be able to fit. Boolean modifiers just carve exactly as the object looks. There is no guarantee that it will fit the part if it's curved enough. So in some cases, it is best that the part to slot in is flat on every side. At this point, I just realized there is an ugly strip down the middle of the torso. You can edit the mesh to fix this, but there is also another way to do it. In the top left where the view mode is, go to Sculpt. Sculpting is a whole other ballgame and really useful for very complicated organic parts. This is not a sculpting tutorial, but for our purposes we're going to use the smooth brush to get rid of the imperfection, which is at the bottom in the middle. Select it and simply brush down along the strip and it will disappear. Voila. Okay, back to Boolean modifiers. To make a flat base, I simply use the modifier with a generated cube. That's it. So now the carved side is completely flat, and now the base of the leg here will have no problem being printed. Lastly, for slot in and glue pieces, I always scale them down a bit so they can slide in easier. You can do this by selecting the object, pressing S for scale, and then typing the value you want to multiply with. Scaling down just 2% is enough, so I press S and 0.98 and enter, and you're done. And that's basically it, guys. Now you have this little robot dude. This has been a very basic tutorial on Blender. There's a lot more to Blender and modeling in general than what we just saw, but if you can do what was described, then you can create something like this in 30 to 60 minutes. The learning curve for the features described here is very shallow. A little bit of practice and these will come to you essentially like second nature. The hard part of this is finding the right playlist for your workflow. So check out our Discord where we have a specific channel for banging tunes. And if you completely screw up, then we also have a channel for that too. As always, guys, let us know what you think in the comments below and we'll see you guys next time. Happy modeling. Later.